The asteroid belt stretched endlessly, a glittering river of jagged rock and ice drifting through the blackness of space. The mining colony of Epsilon 9 clung to one of the larger asteroids like a stubborn barnacle. Its metal hulls rattled with the constant hum of machinery and the occasional tremor from passing asteroids. For years, the colony had harvested rare energy crystals from deep inside the asteroid's core, crystals that could power entire planetary cities. But today, the colony was in chaos. Over the loudspeakers, a calm, mechanical voice repeated the evacuation orders. Attention, all personnel. Evacuation Protocol Alpha 7 is now in effect. All non-essential personnel must proceed to evacuation pods immediately. Most of the workers moved with robotic efficiency. Their faces were pale, and their eyes were wide, but they obeyed. The corporate overseers had made it clear. Efficiency mattered more than sentiment, more than life. Except for Jax Holland.Jax had been a mechanic on Epsilon 9 for 6 years. He had hands that could fix almost anything from failing life support modules to the colony's aging hover cart sand a mind that never stopped calculating possibilities. But no amount of calculation could prepare him for what he saw. When he looked toward the deepest mining tunnel, there, trapped beneath collapsed support beams, was something the overseers had strictly forbidden anyone to interact with: a dragon. Not a dragon of fire and fantasy like old Terran myths. This was a living, breathing, alien creature with scales that shimmered like polished obsidian and eyes like molten gold. It had been discovered during a deep mining expedition months ago, buried in a crystal cavern. Scientists had been thrilled. The corporation had been thrilled. Its biology could generate unimaginable energy. But the dragon was not alone. Nestled beneath its wing was a hatchling, tiny and trembling. Too weak to survive without its mother, Jax froze for a moment, taking in the sight. The storm had caused a structural collapse. If the evacuation continued, the dragon and her hatchling would die, buried under tons of metal and rock. He knew that. And yet, the evacuation orders were clear: leave the tunnels and do not engage. Most of the colony's personnel had already boarded the evacuation pods, their faces lit by emergency lights. Corporate security drones hovered over the main corridors, scanning for anyone who disobeyed orders. Jax felt the weight of his decision pressing down like the asteroid's gravity itself. Then, without thinking, he moved. He grabbed his tool belt, tightened the strap across his chest, and sprinted toward the mining tunnels. Each step echoed through the deserted hallways. Sparks from broken cables hissed around him, and the sound of distant metal groaning under stress made his stomach tighten. The dragon raised its head weakly as he approached, letting out a low, rumbling groan that reverberated through the tunnel walls. Jax felt a pang of sympathy, but he could not dwell on it. First, he had to stabilize the area. He knelt beside the hatchling. Its tiny wings fluttered helplessly, and its scales were still wet from the dragon's protective fluids. Gently, he wrapped a soft energy blanket around it, the kind used for injured miners. The hatchling trembled against him, but did not resist. Then he turned to the dragon. Its massive body blocked most of the tunnel, but Jax could see the injuries, deep scratches along its scales, and a damaged wing pin beneath a fallen support beam. The dragon hissed, not in anger, but in pain. Its golden eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment, Jax felt as though it understood him. He set to work. Using his multi-tool, he began loosening the heavy metal beams, working quickly before the asteroid tremors could shift them further. Sparks flew as his tools cut and welded. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but he ignored it. Every second mattered. A distant alarm blared, warning of an incoming asteroid fragment. The floor shook violently, knocking Jax to one knee. The dragon roared, a deep, echoing sound that shook the very tunnel. Jax gritted his teeth and continued, using his body to brace the final beam as he worked the hydraulic cutter. With a loud snap, the metal gave way. The dragon twisted its massive head and hissed. But Jax held up a hand. Slowly, it lowered itself, letting him access the pinned wing. Carefully, he attached a temporary support brace, using a mix of salvaged metal rods and energy stabilizers. The dragon's breathing slowed, a sign that his intervention was working. He glanced at the hatchling. Its eyes, wide and golden like its mother's, watched him silently. Jax felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had saved injured miners before, even fellow workers' pets. But this felt different. There was something about protecting a new life. Something about defying cold orders to do what was right. Then came the drones. Unauthorized presence detected, a robotic voice announced. Spotlights swept across the tunnel, illuminating Jax and the dragons. He froze, knowing that engaging the drones directly would be suicide. Thinking quickly. He activated a camouflage field from his utility belt. The field made his form blend into the surrounding walls, though only partially. It might confuse the drones long enough for him to escape. He held his breath, inching backward toward the side passage. The dragon hissed again, low and threatening, sensing the approaching danger. Jax knew it was not aggression, just warning. "I've got this," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was convincing either of them. The drones hovered closer, scanning methodically. Jax pressed a button, sending a pulse that temporarily disabled the nearest drone. Sparks erupted from its sensors as it crashed into the tunnel floor. The other drones were calibrated, but by then, Jax had moved the hatchling onto a small hover sled he had patched together for mining equipment. He looked at the dragon. Its wing was still injured, but it could move. Slowly, carefully, he led it toward the tunnel's exit, past the remaining obstacles. The asteroid tremors grew stronger, and small rocks rained from the ceiling. Jax ignored the cuts forming on his arms and hands. Pain was temporary. Survival was essential. Finally, they reached a large observation chamber that overlooked the asteroid belt. The chamber was partially damaged, with glass panels cracked but intact. Through the fractures, Jax could see the evacuation pods streaking toward the safety of orbit. The colony was abandoning them. But Jax felt no fear. Not now. He helped the dragon and hatchling settle in the chamber. He rigged a makeshift energy shield from broken generator panels to protect them from falling debris and the occasional asteroid fragment. Then he sat back on his heels, breathing heavily. The dragon lowered its massive head, resting it near the hatchling. The small creature nuzzled its mother's scales, seeking warmth. Jax watched them in silence. For a moment, the chaos of the storm and the colony's evacuation faded. All that mattered was this fragile family and the human who had chosen to stay. "Don't worry," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "I won't let them hurt you." Outside, the asteroid belt continued its relentless orbit, indifferent to life and death. But inside the observation chamber, a human mechanic defied orders, and an alien mother and her hatchling clung to life. The storm raged on, and the evacuation pods disappeared into the void, leaving the three of them alone against the cold. Empty darkness as night tore what passed for night in space fell over the asteroid belt. Jax worked tirelessly. He repaired broken systems, monitored oxygen levels, and reinforced the chamber. Every task reminded him of one simple truth: humans could adapt, improvise, and protect life when it mattered most, and in that moment. As he watched the dragon's eyes glimmer in the faint light, he knew one thing. Against all odds, they would survive, because humans never truly gave up. The asteroid storm raged on outside, shaking the observation chamber like a living thing. Dust and tiny fragments of rock slid along the cracked panels, rattling against the reinforced frames. Jax Holden crouched near the makeshift control console, his hands moving quickly over blinking panels and frayed wires. Every beep of warning made his stomach tighten. Oxygen levels were stable for now, but only barely. Every second counted. The dragon watched him from her corner of the chamber, her massive head resting protectively near the hatchling. Her golden eyes followed every movement, alert and intelligent, as though she understood that this human had chosen to defy the evacuation orders. Trust, Jax realized, was a fragile thing, even between different species, but somehow it had been granted. "Okay," he muttered to himself, brushing sweat from his brow. "Let's see if we can keep you two alive until someone sees that you matter." The first challenge was power. The observation chamber's systems were unstable, flickering between life and death as the damaged generators struggled to keep up. Jax opened a maintenance hatch and crawled inside. The metal warmed under his hands from the electrical circuits. Sparks hissed as he patched frayed wires together, improvising with spare cables and stripped conduits from broken machinery. The dragon shifted, letting out a soft growl. Her wing, though stabilized with the metal brace, twitched occasionally. She was healing, but slowly. The hatchling whimpered, tiny wings flapping in distress. Jax paused and rubbed the hatchling's head gently. "Don't worry, little one. We're not giving up." Outside, the storm intensified. An asteroid fragment slammed against the side of the chamber, shaking the floor violently. Jax stumbled but caught himself, glancing at the dragons. The mother pressed her body closer to the hatchling, shielding it from the impact. Jax's heart ached at the sight. He had saved miners before, even pets and drones, but this felt different. The stakes were higher. The lives he had chosen to protect were unique, irreplaceable. He crawled out from under the console and set up a temporary force field. The device hummed and projected a faint blue shield over the area, meant to protect them from minor debris. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to buy time. Jax glanced at the hatchling again, who had now curled into a small ball. Its scales shimmered faintly, catching the dim light from the chamber's emergency lamps. Even weak, even small, it was beautiful. Suddenly, the calm in the storm shifted. A series of loud, mechanical beeps sounded from the quarter outside. Jax froze. "Drones," he muttered, his voice tight. He moved toward the side panel and activated the small surveillance cameras he had patched together. 3 corporate security drones hovered just outside, scanning for movement. They had been sent to enforce the evacuation orders, and now they were looking for anyone who had disobeyed. Jax thought quickly. Engaging the drones directly would be suicidal. They were armed with stun beams capable of disabling any human in seconds. He needed a distraction. He grabbed a spare power core from a broken generator and rigged it to overheat, creating a small explosion down the corridor. Sparks and smoke erupted as he triggered it remotely. The drones whirred and adjusted their positions, trying to investigate the sudden anomaly. "Now," Jax whispered, and he moved, using the dim light of the emergency lamps. He led the dragon toward a hidden maintenance hatch in the corner of the chamber. The hatch was narrow, just wide enough for the dragon's body to squeeze through. Though the mother hissed at the tight fit, Jax soothed her gently, explaining in soft words, "I know it's tight, but we have to go." The hatchling clung to its mother instinctively, and Jax lifted them together with improvised harnesses and a modified hover sled. The mechanics of the sled were crude, but it was enough to support the dragon's injured weight as they began their slow journey. Through the service tunnels of the colony, the tunnels were dark and treacherous. Sections had collapsed completely, and jagged metal jutted from broken walls. Every step was a challenge. Jax moved ahead first, checking for loose debris, then signaling for the dragon to follow. She obeyed cautiously, placing each clawed foot with care. The hatchling rode on her back, protected by her wings. Hours passed or maybe minutes. Time felt strange in the tunnels. Jax was covered in dust and sweat, his clothes torn in places, but he kept moving. He had no choice. Survival was the only priority, and now he was responsible for 3 lives, 2 of which were alien and fragile at one point. The tunnels opened into a larger cavern used for mineral storage. Jax scanned the area with a handheld sensor. "We can rest here for a bit," he said, though the words felt hollow. There was no real safety, only temporary shelter. The dragon lay down slowly, her massive body curling round the hatchling. Jax set up a few emergency lights and patched in a rudimentary life support system. The hatchling, exhausted, nuzzled against its mother. Jax watched them in silence for a moment, his chest tight with both worry and awe. "How did it come to this?" he muttered. "How could they leave you behind?" He thought of the overseers, their pale faces in the evacuation pods, their cold eyes seeing only efficiency and profit. Humans were different, he reminded himself. Imperfect, emotional, reckless at times but capable of choosing right over orders. That choice had brought him here. That choice could save lives. The calm, however, was short-lived. From the far end of the cavern, a low humming noise grew louder. Jax stiffened. It wasn't the drones this time. It was something else, something alive. The shadows shifted, and a pair of glowing eyes appeared, reflecting the dim light. A scavenger drone? No, too large, too fluid in movement. Then he saw it, a wild alien predator, drawn by the vibrations of the storm and the scent of life in the tunnels. Its limbs were long and spindly, its mouth full of jagged teeth, and its body moved with terrifying speed. Jax's heart raced. He had no weapons, only his wits and whatever tools he could improvise. The dragon stirred, low growls rumbling from her throat. She rose, wings partially extended, shooting the hatchling instinctively. Jax knew he couldn't fight this predator alone, but perhaps together they could survive. He grabbed a length of conduit and attached it to a power node, sending a jolt of electricity along the metal pipe. As the predator lunged, Jax swung, and the electric arc struck it squarely. The creature screeched, recoiling. The dragon roared, a sound that echoed through the cavern and made the walls tremble. The predator froze, then, as if realizing the danger, backed away slowly. Jax exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah," he muttered. "We're not that easy to scare." For the first time in hours, there was a moment of stillness. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the cavern, the three of them, Humyn, dragon, and hatchling, found a fragile peace. Jax checked the dragon's wing brace and the hatchling's energy blanket, making sure both were secure. "You're going to be okay," he said softly. "I promise." Ours turned into a long, tense night. Jax kept watch, rotating between the dragons, monitoring oxygen levels, and listening for any sign of the patrol drones or other predators. Sleep was impossible, but determination drove him forward. He could not abandon them. By the time the asteroid storm outside began to calm, Jax had made small improvements to the chamber and tunnels. He had reinforced weak supports, patched temporary energy conduits, and even created a rudimentary alarm system to warn of approaching threats. He had done all this without backup, without orders, relying only on human ingenuity, courage, and the stubborn refusal to leave anyone behind. The dragon stirred, nudging the hatchling gently. Its eyes met Jax's, and for a moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Trust had been earned in action, in danger, in shared struggle. And though the future was uncertain, the bond had formed outside. The asteroid belt glimmered in faint light, indifferent and eternal. But inside, in the heart of a shattered colony, human will, courage, and compassion had created a safe haven. Jax allowed himself a small smile. The journey was far from over. Challenges awaited corporate mercenaries, the harsh environment, and the unknown dangers of the asteroid belt itself. But for now, they had survived. And survival, he knew, was the first step toward victory, because humans never truly gave up. And sometimes, that was enough to save a dragon. The asteroid belt stretched endlessly before them, a glittering river of rock and ice, both beautiful and deadly. Jax Holden stood at the edge of the maintenance tunnel, scanning the path ahead with his handheld sensor. The dragon shifted beside him, her massive wings flexing as she tested her injured limb. The hatchling clung to her back, small and fragile, but alive. "They're coming," Jax muttered. The words were barely audible, but the tension in his voice was unmistakable. The corporate drones would not stop. They were relentless, programmed to retrieve or eliminate anything deemed valuable, regardless of life. Jax adjusted the straps on the hover sled he had improvised. It had been patched together from old mining equipment, and energy cells scavenged from the damaged colony. The sled could barely hold the dragon's weight, but it was enough to give them a chance to escape. "Hold on," he whispered to the dragon, as if she could understand him fully. The tunnels outside were narrow, twisting, and unstable. Every step of the dragon sent vibrations through the metal floor, and every vibration risked collapsing sections of the tunnel. Jax led the way, using his experience as a mechanic to identify the strongest paths. Avoiding weak floors and loose debris, the first wave of drones appeared around a bend, their sensors glowing red. They hovered silently, scanning for heat signatures. Jax froze, calculating. Direct confrontation was suicide. Instead, He activated a makeshift decoy, a small robotic probe he had repaired from mining equipment. The probe emitted heat and sound, luring the drones down a side corridor. Sparks flew as the decoy crashed against the walls, and the drones diverted their attention. Move, Jax commanded, and the dragon obeyed, stepping cautiously onto the hover sled. The hatchling shifted nervously, but remained close to its mother. Jax pushed the sled forward with a small energy thruster, the machine groaning under the strain. The chase continued through the tunnels, twisting deeper into the asteroid. The colony's old mining tunnels branched in every direction, a labyrinth designed for resource extraction, not escape. Jax knew them better than anyone. Years of repairs and maintenance had mapped every corridor in his mind. Still, the drones adapted quickly, following heat trails and motion sensors. At one point, the path narrowed to a jagged chute. The dragon hesitated, her injured wings scraping against the metal walls. Jax muttered reassurances, fixing the brace slightly to ease her movement. Almost there, he said, though his own heart was racing. The hatchling whimpered, sensing danger, but Jax's steady presence kept it calm. Suddenly, the tunnel ahead opened into a wide chamber, once used for mineral storage. Sunlight, or what passed for sunlight from the colony's external panels, streamed through fractured glass, illuminating the debris-strewn floor. Jax paused, calculating the next move. The chamber could serve as a temporary refuge, but it was also exposed. The drones could detect them from above. Jax's mind raced. He needed a plan, and fast. He scoured the room for materials, spotting a pile of broken energy cores. Using his tools, he rigged a series of improvised traps, connecting the cores to the chamber's old power conduits. Sparks flew as he tested the circuits. A single trigger could release a burst of energy, enough to disable or confuse any pursuing drones. "All right," he muttered, breathing heavily. "This has to work." He signaled the dragon to move forward, leading her carefully through the traps. The hatchling's tiny claws scraped against the floor, but it remained close to its mother. Just as they reached the center of the chamber, the drones arrived. Red lights scanned the floor, sensors locking onto heat signatures. Jax activated the traps. A surge of energy flashed across the chamber, arcs of electricity jumping between the broken cores. The drones screeched as their sensors overloaded, and sparks rained from their circuits. One crashed into a wall, another spun uncontrollably before collapsing. The dragon roared, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the chamber, sending vibrations along the metal walls. The remaining drones retreated slightly, recalibrating. Jax took the chance to push the sled toward the chamber's exit. The dragon followed, her massive body moving with surprising agility despite the injury. They emerged into the open asteroid belt. The view was breathtaking. Jagged rocks and floating debris stretched in all directions, lit by distant stars. But beauty offered no safety. The drones regrouped quickly, following them into the vacuum with anti-gravity thrusters. Jax glanced at the dragon. She lifted her wings, testing the damaged limb. Slowly, painfully, she began to glide, supported by the hover sled. The hatchling clung tightly to her back, trusting instinctively in the creature and Humyn that now protected it. The chase became a high-speed dance through the asteroid field. Jax steered the sled with careful precision, weaving between massive rocks and avoiding collisions. Sparks flew as the sled scraped against jagged edges. The dragon's roars echoed, deflecting some of the smaller debris and signaling the hatchling to remain calm. The drones fired, beams of energy slicing through the void. But Jax's quick reflexes and the unpredictable movements of the asteroid field kept them safe for now. Each maneuver required split-second decisions. Jax's heart pounded, his mind racing, but he refused to panic. Failure was not an option, after what felt like hours, though in reality was only minutes. They reached a hidden alcove within a larger asteroid. The alcove was natural, a deep cavern carved by ancient collisions. Jax guided the sled carefully inside, ensuring the dragon and hatchling were protected. The drones, unwilling to risk the tight space, hovered outside, scanning. Jax exhaled, exhaustion pulling at him. He checked the dragon's wing brace and adjusted the hatchling's energy blanket. Both were safe for the moment. He knew the corporation would not give up. They would send more drones, more mercenaries, anything to reclaim or destroy the dragon. But for now, they had a reprieve. The alcove was dark, but Jax activated a series of small lights powered by salvaged energy cells. The dragon lay down, curling protectively around the hatchling. Jax sat nearby, his back against the cavern wall, taking a moment to breathe. "You're okay," he whispered to the dragon. "You're okay, little one." The hatchling chirped softly, nuzzling against its mother. Jax smiled faintly. There was a strange comfort in their trust, a silent acknowledgement that despite the chaos, they had survived together. He began making repairs to the sled and the small energy systems around them. Every adjustment was crucial. Any failure could mean death. But Jax was human, and humans had a way of solving impossible problems. Improvisation, creativity, and sheer stubbornness was what had brought him this far. Hours passed in tense quiet. Jax monitored the external sensors, watching the asteroid field for signs of pursuit. Every so often, he would spot a faint glimmer, a drone adjusting its course, and he would prepare the traps again. The dragon slept lightly, one eye always open, while the hatchling dozed under her wing. In the silence, Jax thought about what he had done. He had disobeyed orders, defied the corporation, and risked his life to save creatures no one else seemed to care about. Most humans would have left. Most humans followed rules and prioritized safety. But he had chosen differently, and that choice had kept them alive. A low rumble suddenly shook the cavern. Jax's heart leapt into his throat. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling as the asteroid shifted, threatening to collapse part of the alcove. The dragon stirred, growling softly. Jax grabbed his tools, moving quickly to brace the weak supports. Sparks flew as he welded fractured metal, holding the structure together just long enough for the danger to pass. The hatchling whimpered, but the dragon's protective presence calmed it. Jax felt a deep respect for the alien creatures he had saved. They were strong, intelligent, and instinctively protective of one another, and they had learned, in the short time he had been with them, to trust him. When the tremors finally ceased, Jax slumped against the cavern wall, exhausted but alive. The dragon nuzzled him gently, a silent gesture of acknowledgement. The hatchling chirped, its tiny eyes blinking up at him, for the first time since the evacuation. Jax allowed himself a moment of peace. They had survived the drones, the storm, and the treacherous tunnels. But he knew this was only the beginning. The corporation would send more, stronger, deadlier forces. The asteroid field itself was unforgiving, and they were still alone, 3 lives against the void. But he also knew this: humans never gave up. They adapted, they improvised, they survived, and with courage, determination, and a refusal to leave anyone behind, they could face any challenge. Jax looked at the dragon and hatchling, and a faint smile crossed his face. Together, they had a chance, a real chance. The pursuit was far from over, but for now, they had survived. And sometimes, survival was the first victory. Jax Holden crouched behind a jagged rock formation on the moon's surface, peering through a cracked visor at the distant corporate base. Its harsh, metallic walls gleamed under the cold light of the nearby sun. The base was heavily guarded, with armed drones patrolling the perimeter and motion sensors scanning every inch. He took a deep breath, adjusting the straps on his tool belt. Beside him, the dragon flexed her wings, testing her strength. The hatchling nestled under her protective gaze, small but alert. Jax knew this was the moment that could decide everything. The corporation had abandoned them once, left the dragon and hatchling to die, but this time he would turn the tables. "Ready?" he whispered. The dragon's eyes met his, a silent answer. Trust had formed between them, stronger than any words could express. Jax crept forward, moving silently across the rocky terrain. Every step was calculated, every shadow considered. The base was surrounded by high walls and electrified fences, and the drones patrolled in precise patterns. But Jax had studied their routines. Improvisation, timing, and observation, these were human strengths, and he intended to use them. He reached a supply shed near the perimeter. Inside were crates of old mining tools and spare energy cells. He scavenged what he could, wires, small explosives, and a portable EMP generator he had salvaged from the colony's abandoned labs. These would be his weapons. Humans were not the strongest, the fastest, or the most durable, but they were unpredictable, inventive, and willing to take risks. Jack set the traps first, positioning energy mines along the main corridor and connecting them to motion sensors. A single misstep by a drone or mercenary would trigger a disabling shockwave. Buying precious seconds, the dragon waited in the shadows, her massive form concealed by jagged rocks. Jax led the hatchling, small and trembling, toward the base's ventilation shaft. It was narrow, but it provided access to the interior without crossing the heavily guarded perimeter. Inside, the base was cold and silent. The metallic walls hummed faintly with the energy of countless machines. Jax moved quickly, avoiding surveillance cameras and security lasers. The dragon followed, stepping carefully over crates and pipes. While the hatchling clung to her back, they reached the main control room. Through the observation panels, Jax could see the corporate overseers, pale and cold, reviewing data on their monitors. They were confident, arrogant, certain that nothing could challenge them. But humans thrived where predictability ended. Jax whispered to the dragon, "We create chaos, and they won't know what hit them." The dragon growled low in her throat, a sound that vibrated through the metal walls. Jax activated his improvised EMP generator, sending a pulse of electricity through the base's systems. Lights flickered and alarms blared. Security drones scrambled, disoriented by the sudden surge. "Now," Jax shouted. The dragon sprang into action, her massive body smashing through doors and sending crates tumbling. The hatchling clung tightly, peeping softly but safe under her wing. Jax used the chaos to move forward, planting the energy mines along key corridors. The base's mercenaries reacted quickly, drawing blasters and rushing toward the disturbance. Jax ducked behind a console, triggering a trap that sent sparks flying and a blinding pulse of energy down the hallway. Several mercenaries dropped, temporarily disabled. The remaining forces hesitated, unsure of the origin of the attack. The dragon roared, a sound that shook the walls. It was both warning and attack, a display of raw power. Jax moved alongside her, using the confusion to plant more traps. Every step was dangerous, but every step brought them closer to their goal, reclaiming freedom for the dragon and hatchling, and exposing the corporation's cruelty. In the control room, the overseers panicked. Monitors flashed warnings, and drones moved to intercept the intruders. Jax knew the traps would only delay them. The final confrontation was inevitable. He glanced at the dragon. Ready for the last push? Her eyes glimmered. They moved together, a team united by survival and trust. The final corridor was narrow, lined with reinforced doors and energy barriers. Jax deactivated the barriers one by one using the tools he had salvaged, while the dragon cleared obstacles and intercepted any drones that came too close. Sparks and smoke filled the air, and the metallic scent of overheated machinery burned their noses. Finally, they reached the main reactor chamber. The dragon growled low, and Jax could see the overseers retreating toward the exit, realizing that their carefully controlled base was now a battlefield. Jax set the final energy mine, linking it to the reactor controls. One misstep for the overseers, and the explosion would disable the entire system, ending their immediate threat. The hatchling chirped, peeping softly. Jax knelt beside it, brushing dust from its scales. "Almost there," he whispered. "We're going to make it." The overseers, now desperate, activated a security override, sending a wave of automated defense drones into the chamber. The dragon roared and leapt, smashing drones with her massive claws. Sparks flew, and the air hummed with the energy of collisions and electronic malfunctions. Jax moved quickly, using his tools to disable the remaining drones while avoiding fire from blasters. Finally, only the overseers remained. They stood at the far end of the chamber, weapons raised, expecting to regain control. But Jax was faster, smarter. He triggered the energy mine, sending a controlled shockwave through the floor. The overseers were thrown off balance, their systems temporarily shut down. The dragon roared and stepped forward, her presence dominating the chamber. Leave. Or be disabled permanently, Jax shouted, his voice echoing. It was not a threat. They had already lost control. The overseers hesitated, then retreated quickly, realizing the humans and dragon were in control. The base's automated systems failed one by one, and the alarms finally died. Silence settled over the chamber, heavy and complete. Jax allowed himself to breathe. The dragon nudged the hatchling gently, and the small creature chirped happily. They were alive, safe for the moment, and the corporation had been humiliated. But Jax knew this was not the end. The universe was vast, and danger could come from anywhere. Yet humans had a strength that no machine or alien could predict: courage, ingenuity, and the will to protect those who could not protect themselves. He looked at the dragon, her massive form resting in the center of the chamber. Trust had been earned through action and bravery. Together, they had survived impossible odds. Jax smiled faintly. We did it, he said softly. We're not finished, but we made it this far. The hatchling chirped, its small wings stretching as if to echo his sentiment. Jax knew that, despite the dangers ahead, they would face them together. Humans were not the strongest, but they were resilient. They were clever. They never gave up. And that was enough. As the dust settled and the alarms ceased, Jax and the dragon stood in the reactor chamber, victorious. They had turned the tables on the corporation that had abandoned them, and they had survived by using every tool at their disposal: human ingenuity, courage, and the bonds formed through shared struggle. For now, the base was theirs, a temporary sanctuary. But beyond the walls of the moon, the universe awaited, filled with unknown dangers and challenges. Jax knew that the next battle would be just as difficult, but he also knew this: together, human and dragon, they could face anything. Because humans never truly gave up. And sometimes, that was enough to change the course of fate. The asteroid belt stretched endlessly, a glittering maze of jagged rock and ice drifting through the void of space. Jax Holden stood on the edge of a narrow cliff of fractured rock, surveying the expanse before him. The dragon, her massive form injured but healing, flexed her wings beside him. The hatchling clung to her back, small but alert, eyes shining with cautious curiosity. After the chaos of the moon base, after the battle with corporate drones and mercenaries, they had survived. For the first time, Jax allowed himself to take a deep breath, letting the cold, thin air fill his lungs. They were alive, together, and free. But freedom did not mean safety. The corporation would not forget the humiliation of losing their prized alien specimen. Jax knew they would pursue him, the dragon, and the hatchling across the galaxy if given the chance. He needed a plan, a way to escape, a way to survive long term. He turned to the dragon. We can't stay here. They'll send more. We need a place no one will find us. The dragon rumbled softly in response. Her eyes scanned the asteroid belt, instinctively searching for safe paths, hidden coves, and natural shelters. Jax understood her language of gestures, glances, and sounds now. Trust had been earned, but understanding had grown too. They were partners in survival. Jax scanned the nearby asteroids, looking for a route that would keep them hidden from sensors and patrols. There was a small cluster of rogue asteroids further out, dense enough to hide them from scanners and large enough to provide cover for landing. It was risky. Navigation would be treacherous, but it was their best chance. He checked the hover sled one last time. The energy cells were fully charged, the makeshift propulsion systems reinforced, and the control mechanisms patched to withstand the strain. The dragon's wings, though still injured, were strong enough to assist in gliding. Ready? Jax asked, his voice tight with tension. The dragon's eyes met his, golden and unyielding. She flexed her wings and nodded in the only way she could. The hatchling chirped, as if echoing the sentiment. Together, they would face whatever came next. They launched into the void, the hover sled carrying them forward while the dragon used her wings to glide and steer. The asteroid field rushed past them in a chaotic blur. Rocks glided, sparks flew from the sled's propulsion units, and tiny fragments of ice shredded the surface of the hull. Jax's hands were steady on the controls, his mind focused on every calculation. The drones were behind them, scanning, firing energy pulses. But Jax had anticipated their movements. He led the dragon through narrow passes, twisting and dodging, while the drone beams struck harmlessly against rocks or misfired entirely. The hatchling whimpered but remained close to its mother, trusting instinctively in the team that protected it. Hours passed in tense silence. Jax adjusted the energy output, rerouted power to the hover sled, and monitored the dragon's movements. Every challenge required precision. Every decision could mean life or death. And yet, they moved forward. Together. At last, they reached the dense cluster of rogue asteroids. Jax guided them through the maze of rocks, weaving between massive boulders and narrow crevices. The drones struggled to keep up, their sensors confused by the dense field. Finally, the hover sled came to a stop in a small hollow asteroid, shielded from view. The dragon lay down, stretching her wings carefully, while the hatchling nestled beside her. Jax slumped against a rock, exhaustion pulling at him, but his chest filled with relief. They had made it. For the first time since the storm began, they were truly safe. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." The dragon lifted her head, tilting it as though acknowledging his words. The hatchling chirped, small and bright, as if to celebrate their victory. Jax couldn't help but smile. Survival had been hard fought, but they had made it together. As night or what passed for night in the asteroid belt fell over the hollow, Jax set about fortifying their new sanctuary. He repaired old mining equipment, repurposed energy cells, and set up rudimentary sensors to alert them to approaching danger. Every step reminded him that humans had a unique power, ingenuity. Machines could fail, drones could pursue, storms could rage, but human creativity, combined with courage, could solve almost any problem. Days passed. Jax and the dragons established a routine. The hatchling grew stronger, learning to flap its tiny wings under the watchful eye of its mother. The dragon's injuries healed, and she practiced short glides across the asteroid's surface, testing her strength. Jax maintained the sled, improved the energy systems, and scouted nearby asteroids for resources. Their isolation was temporary. News traveled fast, even in the void of space. The corporation, humiliated and enraged, had begun sending recovery teams. But Jax had anticipated this. He had left false trails, set automated decoys, and created confusing signals to mislead pursuers. Humans were unpredictable, and that unpredictability worked in their favor. One evening, as Jax repaired the hover sled's energy systems, the dragon rumbled softly. He looked up to see her scanning the horizon. The hatchling chirped nervously, sensing potential danger. "They're coming," Jax muttered. He had expected it, but the truth still sent a shiver down his spine. "But we're ready." When the first patrol drones appeared, they found nothing but empty hollows, decoy signals, and the faint trace of a human who seemed to move through impossible routes. Jax watched from his hidden vantage point as the drones struggled, their systems confused and failing. He allowed himself a small smile. Humans thrive where others failed. They adapted, improvised, and endured. Days turned into weeks, and the pursuit grew weaker. The corporation's resources were vast, but they underestimated one critical thing: human resilience. Jax and the dragons had survived against impossible odds, and now they were untouchable, hidden among the rogue asteroids. Their alliance stronger than any pursuer's power. Finally, Jax allowed himself to dream of the future. They would not remain in hiding forever. The dragon and hatchling needed a safe haven, a place where they could live without fear of being hunted. And humans, he realized, could protect that future. He looked at the dragon. Massive wings spread wide as she basked in the faint light of distant stars. She rumbled softly, a sound of approval, trust, and companionship. The hatchling chirped, tiny wings flapping in excitement. "We'll find a safe place," Jax said, voice steady with determination. "Somewhere no one can hurt you. Somewhere you can live freely." The dragon's eyes glimmered, golden and intelligent, reflecting the stars above. The hatchling chirped again, full of life and hope, for the first time since the storm. Since the abandonment, Jax felt a sense of true accomplishment. The human spirit had prevailed, not through sheer strength or speed, but through courage, ingenuity, and an unwillingness to give up. They had faced superior machines, impossible odds, and deadly storms and survived. Jax knew the galaxy was vast and dangers still waited. But he also knew that humans had something unique, the ability to act when it mattered, to protect those who could not protect themselves, and to rise against any threat. The dragon stirred, rising to her feet. The hatchling followed, small but determined. Together, they looked to the horizon, a trio bound by trust, survival, and newfound friendship. Jax tightened the straps on the hover sled, ready to lead them to the next stage of their journey. The rogue asteroid cluster was only the beginning. Beyond it lay uncharted space, unknown worlds, and opportunities to thrive. Humans were not the strongest creatures in the galaxy, but they were resilient, inventive, and fearless in the face of adversity. And that was enough. As they moved forward, Jax, the dragon, and the hatchling became more than survivors. They became pioneers of a new alliance, a symbol that humans, with courage and ingenuity, could protect life, defend the helpless, and change the course of the universe. The stars stretched endlessly before them. But for the first time, Jax felt hope, not just for himself or for the dragon and hatchling, but for humanity. Against impossible odds, they had survived, and together they would thrive because humans never gave up. And sometimes that was enough to change everything.